The person leaking Grand Theft Auto 6 wrote a manifesto, and I have read the whole thing. And the uncomfortable part is not that it is unhinged, it is that quite a lot of it is right. He wants an end to digital pre-orders, an end to finished content getting locked behind a paywall and sold back to you as downloadable content. And he wants single-player games to still work after somebody switches the servers off. Those are not the demands of a lunatic. Plenty of people reading this have said all three of those things out loud in the last year. And 6 days later, the entire thing had fallen apart, which is what this video is actually about. Now, when somebody leaks a game, you expect a certain kind of person behind it. Somebody chasing attention, or money, or just the chaos of it. What actually turned up with the first clip was a document with numbered demands and a line I have not been able to stop thinking about since. Publishers sell licenses and call them purchases. They ship unfinished games and call them living services. That is a better sentence than most of the games writing you will read this week, and it is sitting at the top of a crime. So here is the shape of what happened, and it is not the shape you would expect. The manifesto did not collapse because Rockstar beat it, and it did not collapse because a court got involved. It collapsed because the people he was copying read it, looked at what was watermarked on the footage, and told everybody not to send him any money. Quick note on what this is before we go further. I am not showing you the leak, not a frame of it, not a map image, not one still. And I am not going to name the coin involved or show you a link to it for a reason that will be obvious in about 4 minutes. Everything quoted here comes from the manifesto itself or from an outlet I will name as I go along. So let us actually go through what he is asking for, because almost nobody covering this has bothered. He calls them commandments, which is a bit much, and there are 3 that matter. The first is no digital pre-orders, no paying for something months early on the strength of a trailer, before a single independent person has been allowed to touch it. The second is no fake single-player downloadable content. If the content is finished and on the disc, it should not be sitting behind a second payment. And the third is the interesting one. He wants an offline fallback state for single-player games, so that when a company eventually turns the servers off, the thing you paid for still runs. You have probably lost a game that way. Most people who have been buying games for 20 years have. And that first one is worth sitting on, because it is the one nearly everybody watching this has actually done at some point. Grand Theft Auto 6 is up for pre-order right now. People have already handed over money for it. Nobody outside Rockstar has played it, no independent person has reviewed it, and the last time a date was announced, it moved. So his argument is not really that pre-orders are immoral. It is that you are being asked to pay before anybody neutral is allowed to tell you what you are paying for. And you can see why he picked this game specifically, whatever you think of him. But the manifesto does one thing that turned out to matter more than the rest of it combined. It points at a real campaign called Stop Killing Games. And if you have not come across them, they are an international consumer movement, they are entirely legal, and they have spent years arguing that when a company shuts down a game you bought, you should not simply lose it. That third commandment, the offline fallback one, is basically their whole platform written in somebody else's handwriting. So he was not just making demands, he was borrowing their credibility. And they answered him in public, which I do not think he expected. Their director general is a man called Moritz Katzner, and this is what he said. Do not send these people your money no matter how much sympathy you may feel for their actions. That is the movement whose argument he copied, telling their own supporters to keep their wallets shut. He went further as well. Using illegal means to make a point is unacceptable to us, and does nothing to protect our right to keep using what we paid for. And then the line that actually reframes the whole thing, because it moves the question of who is being hurt. Thousands of developers worked hard on this project, and they are the ones being hit the hardest. Not the executives who decided there would be no disc, the people who spent a decade building the thing and have now watched it turn up online in pieces out of order with somebody else's watermark on it. Which brings us to why they said any of that, because this was never a disagreement about tactics. There is a cryptocurrency attached to these leaks, not mentioned somewhere in a footnote, watermarked onto the footage itself, so it is sitting on the frames while you watch them. The clips have carried links and codes pointing at his site and at the coin, and Kotaku reported that one of them promised more gameplay if people pushed the price up enough. His explanation is that the money funds a secret project against publishers who do not comply, and that it pays for, and I am quoting, the infrastructure needed to strike, and security and protection. So the protest about companies taking your money for things you do not really own now has a payment attached to it, and a promise of something in the future, and no way for you to check whether it exists. And I want to be fair here because I do not know what is in his head. It is possible he believes every word. But that structure is not new, and it does not have a good history. There is one more phrase worth pulling out because it reads differently once you know about the coin. The demand of Rockstar is a public statement and apology, along with a concrete commitment to do better. And then he adds a line that changes the temperature of the entire document. Words are not enough. Restitution is mandatory. Now restitution is a word about money, and he has never explained who he thinks should be paid or how. On its own, you might read it as compensation for players. Next to a coin he profits from, it reads like something else, and I do not think that is an unfair reading. And then there is the thing he did this weekend, which I think tells you more than the manifesto does. Because by now it is fairly clear he is not working from stolen video at all. He appears to have a full working build of the game sat on a machine that he can start up whenever he likes. And what he did with it, according to Tom's Hardware, was go and shoot his own name onto a wall inside the game, one bullet at a time, and post that. Now think about what that is for a moment. It is not evidence of anything, it does not advance a single one of the 3 demands, and nobody looking at it learns anything about digital pre-orders. It is a signature on somebody else's wall. And a protest does not need to sign its own work, but a person enjoying himself very much does. So step back from all of it for a second, because I think the honest summary is uncomfortable in both directions. The argument in that document is broadly correct. Digital only releases $100 editions, and games that stop working when a server gets retired are all real problems. And the people complaining about them are not imagining it. The method is a crime, and the cost of it landed on staff rather than on anybody who made those decisions. And the movement that actually holds that argument legally in public with their names attached looked at him and said, "Do not fund this." That is about as complete a rejection as an idea can get, and it did not come from the company he was attacking. Which leaves the argument itself sitting there, still true, and now much harder to make. Because the next time somebody stands up and says you should be allowed to keep the games you paid for, a portion of the room is going to remember this fortnight and hear a man with a coin. That is the real damage, and it did not land on Rockstar. That is about as complete a rejection as an idea can get, and it did not come from the company he was attacking. And it is worth noticing what Rockstar have said about the argument itself, which is nothing at all. No apology, no statement, no concrete commitment to do better, and no engagement with any of the 3 demands. Their lawyers have been extremely busy, and the company has not said a word. Which is probably the correct move legally, and it does leave the demand sitting there unanswered. Because whatever you think of the man making them, there is still no disc. There is still a $100 edition. And nobody has explained what happens to any of this in 15 years when the servers get switched off. Which leaves the argument itself sitting there, still true, and now much harder to make. Because the next time somebody stands up and says you should be allowed to keep the games you paid for, a portion of the room is going to remember this fortnight and hear a man with a coin. That is the real damage, and it did not land on Rockstar. It landed on everybody who has been making that case properly for years. And Rockstar answer all of this on the 27th, which is 2 days away. An extended look at the game on Netflix 3 in the afternoon Eastern Time exclusively for 6 hours before it reaches their own channels. No apology, no statement, and no restitution, just the finished thing in proper quality, shown by the people who built it. I will be going through it frame by frame when it lands, and I will tell you exactly which of the leaked systems actually survived into the real game.